Welcome. This is our New York Upstate Chapter FAICP Overview session. I'd like to welcome all of you for joining us today. My name is Sean McGuire. I am the chapter president for the New York Upstate Chapter of the American Planning Association. And before we get started, I did want to give a special thanks to Molly, who's also joined us today here from Bergman, for all of her work and putting today's presentation and its graphics together. So let's get started. Give you an overview of what we will cover today. You'll hear a little bit, I'll cover a little bit more about who we are on the call today, along with Rich Unger, who's also one of our FAICP members in the New York Upstate Chapter. Rich and Mark are going to tag team and talk a little bit more about why you might want to pursue the FAICP designation. On the heels of that, Mark and Rich Garino, who is one of our board members, will talk about FAICP eligibility. Rich will then team up with Molly to talk about application requirements, and Rich Unger and one of our latest FAICP members, Nan Stolzenberg, will talk a little bit more about how we can help. So you get a chance to meet our advisory committee members of our chapter, and all of these folks and are committed to raising the awareness of and recognition of some of our best and brightest professionals in the New York Upstate Chapter. This has been a priority, I think, of the entire Upstate Chapter board for some time now, and we'll talk a little bit more about the steps that have been taken to try to increase the number of FAICP members here. So without giving too much away, I'm going to turn this over to Rich Unger to tell you a little bit more about our committee, and I'll be back at the end to wrap things up.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, a little bit about our committee. Our role in this whole FAIC process is to try to cultivate nominees for induction into the College of Fellows. The first part of that process is to organize the call and send out the call for nominees, which did go out, I believe it was end of January. If you're watching this, you've probably already seen that call. So that's our first step. Another aspect of our role is providing a recommended schedule for candidates as nominees or potential nominees to follow. This is not a process where procrastination is your friend. We try to keep you on task. You'll get periodic reminders of where you should be in the process at a particular date and time, taking it in small bites as opposed to one big thing, because there are some steps in here that if you don't get started on time, specifically trying to get supporters, letters of support, if you don't get started on that on time, you may not receive them back on time. And if you don't have those letters of support, you won't be able to put together a complete application. As part of the process, we'll also try to connect you with some of the with a mentor, somebody that has been through the FAICP process, that knows what has to be done, kind of help you through any questions you might have during the process. And then finally, after we've reviewed your initial resume and you submit your 5 top career achievements, we'll recommend the potential nominees to the chapter board. This is all the very beginning, then or at the beginning for the potential nominees, and then we start in with the schedule and all that afterwards. You have to remember, one of the things we are not the writers of the applications. We cannot write the applications for you. That is going to be the potential candidate's job. But we are a resource for you, and we'll be here through the whole process all the way till August 30th of this year. So why pursue FAICP? So why should you seek induction into the College of Fellows? It's pretty simple, really. You've worked hard for your education. You earned your planning certification, your AICP credentials. You've committed to a career in helping communities, and you deserve recognition for your accomplishments throughout that career. It's really pretty much that simple. Of course, others will have, every individual will have their own additional reasons for seeking induction into the college, but we'll go into all that. So, with that, induction into the College of Fellows is the highest honor the American Institute of Certified Planners bestows on a member. So it's a recognition of your professional accomplishments by your national planning colleagues. But I want to add possibly even more than that, and this is for everyone to think about, and it goes back to even when I was nominated. The nomination itself, if it comes, whether it comes from the chapter, whether it comes from a division, or whether it comes from 10 different colleagues writing a letter letters of nomination, it's the nomination itself that's really a high honor, because the people that are doing that are your immediate peers and colleagues. They're the planners that you work with in the New York Upstate chapter, not somebody on a committee that happens to be from Phoenix, Arizona. So just being nominated is an honor in itself, and you need to kind of keep that in mind as you go through the process. There are also benefits to the chapter. One way to look at this is if you are nominated and successfully inducted into the College of Fellows, that's a win for the team. And I'm using that in the broadest sense. A win for the team means it can add prestige to the community you work in or the company you work for your mayor if you are in a community, for your employer, for your boss. It really it can add prestige to the talent pool that they have, because now they actually have a fellow working with them. It also adds prestige to our chapter by saying we have X number of FAICP members. It reflects well on the chapter itself. We're not in the top number. Among all the states, we don't have the most numbers percentage-wise. We're pretty close to what the national average is in terms of percentage FAICP members, but we always want to strive to increase that. And I think we have a talent pool that would justify that.
All right, thanks, Rich. I'll take it from here.
Yep, take it from Mark.
Leone, current chapter treasurer and former chapter president, convened this FAICP committee really to do the things that Rich has said. So FAICP National, it's a well-established program. It's great for the profession, helps to raise the profile of professional planning practice by highlighting the best of the best. And that's what we hope to do here in upstate New York. The program, however, is a male-dominated program. 75% of the FAICP fellows are male, and we really want to help increase the diversity of that statistic by encouraging more applications from our female members of the chapter. The average induction rate for the initial application is 60%. Our success rate in the last cycle was only 20%, but the silver lining for that is that the successful percentage for renominations is even higher than 60%. So even if you aren't successful the first time, we would encourage you to go after a nomination the second time. Next slide, please. So these are our august FAICP members who reside in the New York Upstate chapter of the American Planning Association. The first two, Vijay Miktal and Stu Stein, were nominated and accepted into the Academy of Fellows back in the year 2000. And our most recent successful inductee is Nan Stolzenberg, and she thankfully has joined our committee, and hopefully later on will provide some good perspective on how this committee was helpful and sort of the best practices of navigating what is a cumbersome process to build a nomination. Next slide, please. So, Rich G will talk a little bit about coming up FAICP eligibility. Next slide, please. But I just wanted to mention where we all began, and that was back in 2018. And our current chapter president, Sean McGuire, when he was the awards committee chair, established a new category, and that was called the Upstate Fellow. And the intent of that program was to get people in the mindset of thinking about the kind of information they will have to gather, and in order to, we would hope, encourage applications to the national FAICP program. So in 2018 and 2019, we were pleased to award Upstate Fellows to John Steinmetz and Mike Long, both of which subsequently were inducted into the College of Fellows in 2020. Building on that effort, and directly as a result of me personally having to write their nomination letters, I really wanted to convene a committee so I didn't have to do that again. So that's partially why this committee was established back in 2021. But I think more than that, it was really established to create an institution to advance nominations at the chapter level moving forward, and also, really provide a clear sounding board for potential nominees, because planners are asked to do something that they're not wholly familiar with, and that's sell themselves. And so really that needs to be a focus of any potential nomination that's generated through this program. So we are going to try to help you, as a committee, to really be unabashedly boastful about your incredible contribution to the planning profession and to the world that you live in. And with that, I will turn it over to Rich Guarino, our chapter's professional development officer, to walk us through the eligibility criteria.
Thanks, Mark. So National APA sends us lots of information, and one of the things that they send us every year is a listing of all of our members who are eligible for FAICP designation. So we have a list of who's eligible to be nominated and awarded. However, it used to be you had to be a practicing planner for 15 years. That's recently been changed. Now looking for only 10 years as an AICP member. And you must be a member in good standing. And the way that APA defines good standing is 3 different criteria. First of all, you're obviously, they need their money, so you need to have your dues paid. So if you owe any back dues, that will need to be settled first. Second, you need to have met or not be delinquent on any CM requirements. So AICP members know that you need to maintain your 32 credits every 2 calendar years. As a professional development officer, if you are curious about where you stand on that, you can either let me know and I can tell you, or you can also check out your My APA, and that'll tell you how many credits you have, how many carried over from last year, and how many specific targeted area credits that you need and have. Finally, you must have no ethical violations. So if anyone has a complaint that was lodged against them to AICP, that needs to be taken into account, and I'm sure resolved in a satisfactory way from AICP. So you also need to demonstrate your outstanding contributions to the profession over an extended period of time. Since this is the highest AICP designation, simply just stating your everyday tasks may not be sufficient. So this is your chance to shine and show where you led and where you were a good example of a practicing AICP planner and how you helped your community. So basically, like it says, what makes you stand out? Everyone who's a planner does day-to-day things, but what makes you stand out that you should be recognized for this distinguished honor? Next, we'll go over some of the nomination and endorsement options. Rich had mentioned that there's 3 different ways that you can have your nomination endorsed. The first is through this committee, so New York State Upstate New York chapter. The other is through one of APA's divisions. APA has a number of divisions, so it could be one of those, or from 10 AICP members in good standing, and we just went over what good standing means. So, so you can work with the FAICP Advisory Committee. Once that's done, we can recommend you to the chapter board, and you must meet the interim submission guidelines as defined.
All right, thanks, Rich.
Yep.
So kind of go through the highlights here of the application requirements. There are just a couple of changes from the last round of submissions. If you weren't aware, the sort of timing of the FAICP nomination process follows submission of your application or your nomination in odd number years, and then they're ultimately announced and inducted in an even number year. So, hopefully the idea there is giving you enough time to piece it together over the course of a year. I know for some, it's not maybe on the top of your mind right after the end of the previous year's nominations being announced. So this year, the deadline for nominations is August 30th, and that is midnight in Central Time, I believe, or Central or Pacific Time. Either way, midnight on the 30th. And from there, as Rich said in the beginning, you really don't want to wait to piece any of this together. It's not something you can start doing in July, or potentially even June. I mean, it's a lot of work, and you need to be coordinating with others to get things together, which is why, we've kind of put a lot of this information together for you from the committee. So more or less, the application itself is pretty simple. It is in one PDF. So they want you, I'll talk about the format in a second, but they want you to put together these first 6 items in a single PDF. So that includes your endorsement letter, which each element now has or always has had, but has a maximum page number. So that endorsement letter, which if you go through us, if you're seeking chapter endorsement, you would be drafting that, and we will, the chapter board would sign off on it. So that is the first element. You need a narrative statement that's 1 page, which includes your top 5 achievements in bullet form. An annotated resume, so that you have up to 10 pages to put all of the information that you feel relevant and pertinent to put on your resume there. Letters of support, they want at least 5, no more than 10. And each of those are expected to be no more than 2 pages. The included in that should be a cover page that has a table, which I'll show an example of, which includes the summary of the letter authors, just it's sort of kind of that index to see, who is included in your list for letters of support. And then finally, it is on its own page, but it is limited to 100 words, a 100-word statement, which is typically just kind of a very pared down version of your narrative statement. The other 2 elements that are required as part of the application is a headshot, as well as the application fee. The headshot should be entirely separate As you know, I mentioned before, you'll have that PDF submission in all of the other elements. They do not want your photo or anything included in that application PDF. That is to be submitted separately. This year, National has set up an online nomination form. So in there, you'll see there's a checklist right at the front. It goes through exactly everything I just walked through in the previous slide, and making sure you're saying, yes, I've covered all these things. And then you can attach your PDF package, as well as upload your portrait headshot, which they want to be labeled with your name. And you can also pay the fee now through that exact same nomination form, which is all done through credit card. There are some really specific details for putting together the application itself in terms of the format. This is consistent. It's the same thing that it has been, at least from what I can see over the last couple of years. You know, a minimum of 11-point font, minimum 1-inch margins, separator pages between each one of those elements. So essentially a cover page before your letters of support, cover page before your 100-word statement. Making sure, if you do use images, they really discourage it unless it is very pertinent and supportive of and helping to demonstrate the information on the page. I think I've only seen done successfully in the context of your resume, annotated resume. And in the same way that you aren't to include any photos of yourself, you cannot include any hyperlinks in the PDF application either. So they want it to be kind of as force you to get as much information into the actual content of the page itself as you can. All that being said, that is obviously a little bit more of it's a tech-based submission and nomination package process. Now that especially that they want to have the PDF, they don't want a scanned version. They want it to be an original, all the documents merged together, as I said, in the previous from the previous page. So if you're someone that, maybe needs help pulling all of your letters of support and things into one document without scanning them, unless a tech savvy friend, we can certainly help, maybe put some of those things together. That's not a problem as long as you have the content. Something else that is new for this year, and it is a little bit of a change from previous years. Before, you had to choose a nomination category. So either saying you were submitting under professional practice, teaching, mentoring, etc. Now they've kind of removed that as a requirement. So you don't have to actually indicate which one of these you would be submitting under. They more provide them now as an addendum to the application guidelines and giving you recommendations for how to focus your application and your nomination content. So just as before, where you really wouldn't want to apply under 3, 4, or all of these, we still would recommend you focus on 1 or 2 of the career areas and then follow sort of the guidance there under each of the features and the tips for each career area to make sure you're really providing the detail and that. Couple other general application tips: make sure you're following instructions. There's a ton more. We'll get to it at the end. There's a lot of resources online now, both from National as well as previous application examples. There is a nomination guidelines document for this coming submission that you can find on the chapter's FAICP page as well as APA National page. It has all of the details that I just went over. So, making sure you're using the right font size, the right margins, you're not, you're following things graphically the way they're supposed to be. Keep in mind that you really want to be focusing on quality, not just quantity. We're learning that, the approach to a sort of bulleted list of look at all these, comp plans that I've done isn't really what they're looking for to substantiate your application into FAICP. They really want to see more of that quality of the work, the impact you've made, and how that's happened over time. Want to make sure you're clearly defining the role that the nominee has had, the leadership components, the impact, as I said before, making connections to APA and how, the nominee may have advanced the planning profession. Make sure, again, as a resource, reach out to us if there's anything you have a question about, if you just want some guidance on, language, if things are strong enough, what information might be relevant, or, if you're trying to cut things down on pages, maybe getting help to focus on what, to include. Make sure that you're being specific and using concrete examples for each of the previous sort of summaries on all of the work and projects and things you do. Obviously, as always, make sure it's accurate and complete. Try not to do estimates of dates, be as specific as you can, and make sure you're making it interesting, right? Telling the story and showing the thread of how the nominees' work has really, gone over the years and gone from point A to point B to bring about that impact, which is, sort of the thread of why they would make a great FAICP. In terms of letters of support, and this is another one we just wanted to call attention to, because I think this is one I know that when I helped prepare applications, it was a little bit difficult to coordinate, and I know others have experienced that as well. While they ask for at least 5 and no more than 10, definitely ask for more than 10. Because all of the ones, some people may not get them back to you in a timely way, which would be unfortunate, but not all of them will be created equal, unfortunately. So you want to make sure that you're giving yourself an opportunity to select the best ones that are going to support your application in the best way and have the strongest language. One of the ways, and this is the example on the screen here, one of the ways that, I previously worked to try to make sure that happens and to give those that I'm asking to write letters of support some guidance is I literally gave them a Word document that was pre-filled out with the information of who it's to and who it was about, and then gave them the criteria directly from the guidebook so that they could see this is specifically what the type of information, this is the type of detail that I'm looking for. It might also be valuable to include, hey, we worked or this person worked with you on such and such project or with such and such topic. Could you include a specific comment or, something to that effect? Speak directly to that project, things like that. You also have to know and be able to define the relationships. So these should be people that you are selecting in your letters of support that are either showing relationship of longevity or can speak to certain periods and points in the development of your career. So in the letters of support table, this is again a snapshot of the guidebook. They want to know that full table in the beginning, who it is, but they also want to know how you know them and how long you've known them or when it was that you interacted with them, and give a brief sort of statement as to why you included them as a part of your nomination package. So this is arguably the biggest section of the entire nomination package, right? I mean, you get a 10-page annotated resume and you get up to 10 2-page letters of support. So a lot of thought should go into who you're asking and making sure you're getting the details that you'd like from these. I think it's okay too to go back and kind of work with people as well to help make them stronger if you need to. All right, Rich.
Okay, thank you, Molly. So now the question is, how can we help you? So let's go back to that a little bit. The advisory committee, if you are seeking chapter endorsement, you will work through the FAICP advisory committee. The first task that you'll have to do, which you probably noted in the call for nominations or for nominees, was you need to submit a resume to us by March 3rd, and along with that, preferably in bullet form, but a little description of what you see as your top 5 career achievements. We will use those those achievements, review them, and your resume. It does not have to be annotated. at this point in the process, but we'll use the resume and your brief descriptions to make a potential recommendation to the executive board. So the role of our committee in this is to recommend to the executive board based upon our review. The other thing that we will do, and I think this is maybe one of the most significant parts or ways that we can help, is that we've put together a submission timeline. The first deadline in that timeline is March 3rd. As I mentioned, you submit your resume and top 5 achievements. The last task in the timeline is August 30th. That's the actual submittal of your nomination package. In between, there are a number of other tasks that need to be conducted. For example, if you see May 5th, focusing on the letters of support, because it takes some time. You really need to be asking by May 5th, the people that you're going to ask for support, you need to ask them for that at that point in time. They need to have them back to you by July 7th. And it's kind of getting feel for this. If that doesn't happen in that window, you're going to be really pressed to get your whole application done properly. So there are a number of things that we will prompt you with. We will send you out periodic emails saying it's now May 1st. You should have asked for your letters of support. If you haven't, make sure you ask for them by May 5th and remind them that they're due July 7th. We'll send something out that says you need to submit your final nomination letter to us for review by July 14th. So about a week before that, you'll get a notice to say, this is where you should be in the process. So basically we're prompting you along, because it is, as you know, in any project, it's real easy to say, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll get it done next week. That can't happen here. You get behind, and it kind of, it will snowball on you. Okay. I believe
So I've
that
been
is
asked,
all I have. Yeah, Molly. Or
yeah, I've been asked to kind of, talk a little bit about my experiences. I'd like to reiterate all of the things that folks have said before. The timeline is critical. You have to really pay attention to the timeline. It's super helpful, especially, we're all busy and trying to do 15 million things at once. And I think that my experience was the tasks take longer than you think they will. So I think that it's really important moving forward to stay in communication with the committee, pay attention to the emails that you get that remind you of when certain things are going to be, and allow yourself ample time for the preparation. I think that it's really, I think it was Mark that said, we don't congratulate ourselves enough. And so, we're busy doing our work, and then we move on to the next job, and don't always take the time to reflect on, how was that impactful, and what did it mean to the community? And I think that takes time. It's like you look at your resume in a totally different way when you're trying to look at what did I really accomplish with each one of those tasks. I think the 100-word statement, for me, I had 28 years of trying to compress into 100 words, and 100 words shouldn't take very long. It took a really long time to figure out, how to make that both impactful and as Mark said, boastful of yourself and realistic, but it takes some thought. But it's very worthwhile. I didn't really realize what I would get out of it. Just the nomination and going through it meant a lot for me to reflect back on what I actually have done and what it's meant. And so that was like super important. Soliciting and selecting the letters of support. I agree that I think for mine, all of the people that I asked for letters of support wanted to know what the criteria were so that they could write an appropriate letter. So adding that in when you contact them, so they don't feel like, oh, I don't know how to write a letter of support. There's those 4 or 5 criteria that are outlined in the guidelines that you should give them. I had a mentor who was like, you know, I couldn't have done this without him. It was incredibly helpful to banter back and forth about some of these things and how to make the application as strong as it could be. So I highly recommend that if you don't choose to have a mentor, have someone else help with at least proofreading, you know, because, you know, we look at the same documents 50 times and often don't see something, but someone else will. So it's really important to proofread and make sure you don't have any of those little glitches in there. Of course, paying the nomination fee is something we all have to do a part of it. The advisory committee is here to serve as your liaison with the chapter. As I said, we'll schedule the reminders and the check-in on progress, and I think that's going to be a huge help to you all as you go through and advising you on some areas where you know, it could be the strength of your nomination or areas that could be improved. We'll be reviewing the nominations for completeness and hopefully have suggestions to improve the application so you'll be more successful. If you move forward with this, my advice is to really, it's your own mindset that took me the longest to kind of convert from this long list of all of the things you've done to how have they been meaningful and what was my role in making them meaningful. And once I kind of wrapped my head around that outlook, then doing the annotated resume and the 100-word statement became a lot easier. It took me a while to kind of switch from this list to the impact. So I think that's my tips for that and working with the committee to help you through the process. So I'll turn it back.
Thanks, Nan. Thank you, Molly, Rich, and Mark for your time today and walking us all through this process. Listen, we as planners are so used to telling our community stories. The one great thing about FAICP is it's a chance to tell your story. And I really encourage you to do that because you all have so many great stories out there to tell. And I know so many of you that I think are ready to start moving in this direction, or at least thinking about it. If you don't think you're ready, I think you know somebody out there in the chapter that is worthy of this and you know, may not have joined in today, but maybe they're a mentor, maybe they're a friend, maybe they're a colleague. So I just ask you for one favor today, which is just help us get the word out. Share what you've heard today, share a link to this webinar to our FAICP page of the chapter at the national level. And let's get out there. Let's get that percentage up there. Let's challenge Mississippi for a significant percentage of FAICP members in the chapter. And if I could, you know, leave one last tip, and I'll, you know, borrow from something Rich has said. This is your chance to brag. Just don't lie, but brag and feel confident in doing so. So here on the screen, you can reach out to us at FAICP@nyupstateplanning.org. You can check out the FAICP page at APA National with the new nominations package toolkit out there. Also, our chapter page under nyupstateplanning.org/FAICP. You'll see the schedule for the committee, this webinar, slides and reporting, application tips, and links to those national resources. So with that, I think we're on to the last slide, which is just, again, a thank you for joining us. And I think we have a few minutes for question and answers.
Sure. So Eve put a question in the chat box. I can unmute any of the attendees. So I'll just unmute you, Eve.
Yeah, there. Hi. Thank you very much for the presentation. This has been really helpful. I find that the redacted nomination packages available at the national website are particularly unhelpful, and I wonder if our FAICP members would be willing to share their nomination packages so that we could get a little better idea of what you're, just the story that you're telling is, the redaction is really distracting. Thank you.
That is something that we've done previously. I know we made available John Steinmetz's nomination and Mike Long's nomination. And I think actually the contrast between the two is, I think, very helpful. They both took a unique approach to the nomination. One being more, one being a little bit more flashy and forward, and another being more narrative. But each one was successful. So I think those two nominations at very least can be made available.
I'll say just to that end as well, and we had kind of talked about this in the last time's webinar as well. I did help put John's together. Well, I put John's, I didn't help, I did it. I put John's together in a graphic package. And I think that, you know, going through this process and more things that we're doing, you know, I even look at, like I was saying with the resume, right, the list of things and activities. It's about quality, right, not quantity. And, you know, I think that was something actually in his resume that I think could get better. So, you know, I wouldn't just take that either as, oh, well, his was good and his was accepted. And, you know, because I think we have seen some that may be strong and have used maybe a similar approach, and we're not as successful or didn't get as good feedback or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, absolutely, that'd be the thing to share.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note the process on the reviewer side. So they receive 200 plus nominations annually. And they have a volunteer group of, I think, 10 members. Is that right, Rich? That have to review all 200 nominations. So if you put yourself in their shoes, you got to make sure you're not burying the lead. You got to make sure you put everything, you know, make it as pithy as possible. Because if I'm a volunteer on my 10th application at 8 o'clock at night, you got to make sure you're calling things out pretty clearly.
If it's of any help, I certainly can share mine as well, or pieces of it, if that's what the group wants.
And I would say, I forewarned, I would share mine. I wouldn't have any problem with that. However, mine was 2008, and they've changed the rules. They've changed the way they look at things. Have no idea whether it'd even be accepted today in the format that I put it in. I know that they allowed more pictures back then. So things like that, they wouldn't allow now. What you really want to do, though, keep in mind, I think Molly touched on this, whatever you do, look at others. You've got to tell your story. You've got to make this a story. It's got to be interesting for the reviewer. Let's call him the reader. It's got to be interesting for them to read. Yeah, oh, things that catch their eye, catch their attention. So you got to tell a story, no matter what kind of little format or style you use.
And I think that was what I was going to say, is what Rich covered exactly, is that no matter what successful application you look at, tell your story first, and then look back to see, you know, maybe there's an idea that you haven't thought of. But if you can't tell your story first, I think you're going to find yourself in a tough position moving forward.
Yeah, correct.
Yep. There are some graphic template things available too. I mean, as you know, they do have very specific format guidelines in the 11-point font, 1-inch margins, cover pages, etc. But it doesn't mean that you can't be creative. And you know, something as simple as using a Word document template, just making sure your font and your margin settings are correct. I used an InDesign template file, may have an opportunity to provide support to someone again this year for that. And, if anyone's interested, just food for thought on that. I mean, they explicitly say that the graphic representation or the format does not go into it, but it just, as Mark said, I mean, you want to stand out.
Yeah.
In some way.
Any other questions?
Questions?
No, I think at this point, if you have any questions, if you're viewing this after the fact, feel free to, again, send us an email at FAICP@nyupstateplanning.org. And with that, unless there's closing comments, I really thank you all for being here. Penny, thank you so much for bringing your question forward. Have a great one.
Thank you.